So how did George H.W. Bush become president of the United States? And as I said, he didn't really have the kinds of things that would recommend him normally. He ran in 1980 against Ronald Reagan and lost. Reagan was much more charismatic, among other things. But the answer was that he had been on a kind of a fast track. He'd been promoted continuously. It began, you might say, in 1976 when he was appointed director of the Central Intelligence Agency by Gerald Ford. And I went back and looked at that, and like many of these other things, it looked preposterous. Why should this particular man, out of everyone in the country, a man they said had no background or knowledge at all about intelligence, why would they put him in charge of an agency which right at that time was under the fiercest scrutiny, massive spotlights on it, about abuses that the agency had committed domestically, abroad. You may remember the hearings of Senator Frank Church, and they were looking at all this stuff, and it was a very delicate moment for the CIA. Of all the people they could have put in, they put him in. And I couldn't understand that. And I went back and looked at the newspaper clippings, and they sort of just said, They shrugged. Didn't know why he'd been put in. And I thought there's got to be an explanation. Well, the explanation was that the opposite of what we were told. We were told he was a neophyte who was brought in for that reason. The real story was he was put in because everybody thought he was a neophyte, but he wasn't a neophyte. In fact, what I discovered in researching Family of Secrets was that George H.W. Bush had a secret life. And in his secret life, he was an intelligence officer of some kind. He basically was America's Vladimir Putin. And we begin to see signs of this because I go back through his life. I go all the way back to the early 1950s, even to the 1940s when he's in World War II in the Navy as a flyer. And you can see he's doing intelligence work. He was recruited because, you see, back in those days, the intelligence services were basically staffed with the sons of the wealthy families. Particularly naval intelligence was very much looking after the interests of those families and their companies. And so there he was in World War II doing intelligence work. He then purportedly goes into the oil business, but he joins a family company called Dresser Industries. And as I point out in Family of Secrets, and I actually quote from their own correspondence that I was able to obtain, they're actually talking about the company's role in recruiting agents for the CIA. This is Dresser Industries. Then he starts his own company, and it's a very peculiar outfit because he starts a little offshore drilling company, but he's going all over the world where they have no clients and no rigs. It doesn't make any sense. It looks like a cover. And then I discovered that a man who helped him start the company was an active duty CIA officer who at the tender age of 26 retired to go into the oil business. And then you see them put a rig up near the Bay of Pigs invasion site. So you can see what's going on here. And this just amazed me. And so I thought, well, I'm going to follow the father all the way forward. So you see him getting elected to Congress, and he's going to Vietnam with this CIA man, and they're there during the period of the Phoenix program, the assassination program, and they're there looking around, making inquiries, contacting some of these folks, and then we go forward. And so I began looking actually at George H.W. Bush's relationship with Richard Nixon, because I could not understand why Richard Nixon appointed him the ambassador to the United Nations and gave him all these opportunities. It didn't seem to make any sense, again. And as it turned out, there was this backstory. And I don't want to give away the entire book. I try to write it like a thriller. And even with these revelations, I might say I'm just scratching the surface. But in Family of Secrets, I have several chapters just about the unknown relationship between Richard Nixon and the Bushes and their circle.
And in the end, it didn't work out well for Richard Nixon.
Well, that's right, because you see what happened was the secret that Richard Nixon had was that he was brought into politics by, guess who? The Bushes. This is not in any of those books that folks may have on their bookshelves. Basically, what I discovered was that back in the 1940s, there was a congressman in California who was very determined at investigating and holding hearings about and legislating abuses by Wall Street and by not just the financial houses and insurance companies and so on. This was in the aftermath of the Great Depression. And he was concerned that if we didn't regulate these outfits, we could have another, say, a recession or a depression, as of course we in the end did. And this man became a threat to these Wall Street interests, and they wanted him out. And the way they were going to get him out was they were going to run somebody against him who they could control. Well, the person they chose was Richard Nixon. And I actually describe in Family of Secrets Prescott Bush being in Whittier, California, in the district where Richard Nixon would run from, right at the point where they choose him. And he's there buying up a defense contractor in concert with the family that owned the Los Angeles Times, which ended up being some of the chief sponsors of Richard Nixon's political career. So there's a whole other story there. Richard Nixon basically bought and paid for by these banking interests. And I believe Richard Nixon deeply resented this. In his whole career, he was a man struggling to be himself. And we know him as this vilified figure, but he turns out to be enormously more complex. He basically had made a deal with the devil, and he couldn't get out from under these people. And you may remember that he used to sometimes rail against the Eastern establishment. That's who he was talking about. He was talking about these bankers that owned him. And so he had to continually do favors for the Bush family and their circle. But when he became president of the United States, he didn't play ball. And they pressured him to take George H.W. Bush, who had been a freshman congressman, and make him his vice president. And he didn't do it. And I think one of the reasons he didn't do it, he actually told people, he said, I put Spiro Agnew in as my vice president he called it an insurance policy on his life. Because Nixon knew nobody would want something to happen to him and Agnew to become president. And I actually believe that was the main reason he took this man who was so loathsome. In any case, I then tried to understand what their ongoing relationship was, and I discovered that Nixon tried to assert his independence from the Bushes and all of these other people, and they turned on him.